Hi, I'm Mohsen, and I'm so excited to welcome you to The Seeking Soul. This podcast is a space where we explore topics like philosophy, spirituality, and literature, often from perspectives you may not have encountered before. As someone who grew up traveling, I've had the privilege of witnessing the deep similarities between cultures and people, even when mainstream narratives focus on what divides us. As an Iranian American, I've always felt to share the beauty, wisdom, and lessons from my Eastern heritage with my Western community, and vice versa. My hope is to be a bridge between these two worlds, fostering a sense of oneness and unity. With the help of AI, this dream feels more achievable than ever. Using documents and notes, I've provided with the link of the sources in the description. Along the way, you might encounter ideas that feel new, challenging, or even uncomfortable, and that's okay. That's the purpose of this space, to listen with empathy and approach every perspective with love and curiosity. Welcome to the Seeking Soul.
Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Seeking Soul podcast. In this episode, as I'm pretty sure you've all witnessed the rise of AI entering our lives and the news and the noise, I thought this book would be a great read to really differentiate between true art and commercial art. To give more background about myself, I've been working in the TV, film, and advertising industry for the past 20 years. I started my career in animation, where I created TV series for children. And as I moved to Los Angeles, it kind of shifted more towards visual effects, where it's the CGI for movies that you see. Obviously, the rise of AI news has really brought a lot of questions, concerns about people in my industry as well, where now it is advertised by these companies that you can just prompt a couple of words and you'll get the image that you want. Obviously, as a professional, for those of you who are a professional in the art industry, in any kind of medium, it is not as easy as it is claimed. You have to put so much time and effort in it. But the biggest question for me was especially this past 2 years, was what is really art? Because there was a really hot debate over the content that these AI companies are using, whether if it's copyrighted, whether if it's stealing other artists' work. All of these has really made me question about what I like to do as a person, as an individual, and reflect back of what have I been working on most of the time. And is it really art? Is it really true art? All of this reminded me of the book that I read a couple of years ago about What is Art by Leo Tolstoy. I highly recommend everyone who's interested in um, any kind of medium of art and who's interested in understanding art to really give it a read. It basically goes over Leo Tolstoy's experience and what it really inspired him to write this book, as it was a performance show that he attended, and he experienced what the artists and the performers go through in order to produce that final result. And at the end, was the final result really, could it be really called an art? As we live in an age that monetization is a big force of motivation, I think it gets diluted with what really art is. After reading this book and reflecting back, I think the whole AI concept really made me differentiate between what really art is and what most of the time I've been doing for a living, which, to be honest, is a commercial art. Uh, Once you read this book, you also kind of understand, or you also learn, as I did, that a true art is really something that will motivate and inspire and uh, transfer an individual's true authentic feeling to one another without any extra explanation in order to convey that feeling to another person. That being said, doesn't matter the tool or the medium that's been used. As long as you're very clear in terms of the emotion that you're transferring, you're very authentic as an individual in terms of that experience. And the emotion is very raw, and which is why we don't see it that often, because most of the time artists get busy and convoluted with monetizing art. And once you have money involved, obviously the raw feeling and the pure feeling gets a little bit faded because it's not authentic anymore. And the purpose is for its financial reasons, not human experience, not human emotion experience. Which, when I think about it, most of the time, famous artists have only a few or a hand selected or pieces of work that really resonate in a global scale with their audience, which I think those are the moments that the artists were at that time were very authentic with the product or the art that they produced. I think this book is definitely worth giving it a read, whether you are an artist yourself or an art enthusiast or someone who cares about what they consume, whether if it's visual or audio. I think it is very important to differentiate between commercial art and actual art itself. I think once this is differentiated between a society, then we no longer care about the medium that it's been used. We no longer care about the beautification of the art or the very tiny details or the macro details of the art, and trying to spend hours and hours talking about the detail that was used rather than the feeling that it actually was able to transfer to the audience. Give this a read, and I hope you like this and enjoy it. Let me know in the comments. I hope you like it. Enjoy this podcast.
Have you ever found yourself standing in front of something in a gallery, maybe, or listening to some music, or even reading a book, and you're just like, what is this? And why is it supposed to be art? Why important?
Right.
Sometimes, I got to admit, I felt a bit put off or just completely baffled. And then you get these really vague answers, about beauty or taste.
Yeah, and those answers often don't really help, do they? They leave you feeling maybe even more confused.
Exactly.
It's really interesting, though, is that feeling. It's not just you. It's a puzzle people have wrestled with for ages. And this deep dive we're doing today, looking at this really powerful piece of writing, well, it suggests those vague answers about beauty.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the whole problem starts.
Absolutely. So for this deep dive, we're really jumping into a challenging, but I think incredibly insightful look at art. We've been digging into excerpts from this profound book called What is Art? It's a text that really dares to question, our most basic assumptions about art.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission today, for you listening, is try and cut through some of that confusion. And maybe together we can unpack the really deep and sometimes, controversial role art plays in our lives.
In this source, it kicks off by pointing out something pretty staggering. The sheer amount of resources society just pours into art.
Right.
We're talking millions, in government money, subsidies, then hundreds of thousands of people spending their entire lives, often from childhood, on things like these incredibly elaborate opera rehearsals or just churning out novels and poems day after day. It's a huge, huge amount of human energy and money being spent.
It really is a paradox when you think about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
All that effort, all that investment for something we can't even seem to agree on what it is.
Yeah, it makes you ask, if we're pouring so much in, what exactly are we investing in?
Okay, so let's unpack that. What's the usual answer people give, the sort of knee-jerk reaction?
Well, yeah, the common response, the one you hear from lots of people, maybe even some critics, is pretty simple. Art is the activity that produces beauty.
Sounds straightforward enough,
Yeah.
but this is where our author really starts to push back.
Yeah, exactly. He argues there's a big subjectivity trap hidden in that definition. Because when you look at what philosophers and aestheticians actually mean by beauty, it often just boils down to like a kind of pleasure we get that doesn't give us any personal advantage. So it's just pleasure for pleasure's sake.
Which makes it totally subjective,
Yeah.
a matter of taste.
Yeah,
One person finds beautiful, another might not at all.
precisely.
Yeah.
And if beauty is just subjective pleasure, well, where does that logic end? The author points out some pretty wild examples from past thinkers. Some stretched the idea of art so far it included the art of taste, the art of touch, even the art of smell.
Seriously. The art of smell.
Yeah, one writer apparently even suggested that the art of cooking succeeds in making of an animal's corpse an object in all respects tasteful.
Okay, hang on. So cooking a nice steak is high art. My Friday night pizza could be a masterpiece.
Well, that's the point, right? It shows how this beauty definition gets so vague, it could mean almost anything that gives someone pleasure. It kind of strips the word art of any specific meaning.
And he also mentions a historical shift, doesn't he, about the ancient Greeks?
Right. He points out that thinkers like Plato and Aristotle, they didn't really separate beauty from goodness. But later on, that separation became central to aesthetics, to how we think about art now. And our author argues that divorcing art from sort of moral goodness or truth is a really big deal.
Okay, so if the whole beauty definition is flawed, too subjective, too vague, what does he offer instead? What's the alternative?
This is where it gets really radical. He proposes a completely different idea. Art isn't about beauty, it's about infection. But here's the core idea, he says. The activity of art is based on the fact that a man, receiving through his sense of hearing or sight another man's expression of feeling, is capable of experiencing the emotion which moved the man who expressed it. That's the infection.
Ah, okay, so it's not about whether it looks pretty or sounds nice. It's about whether it successively transmits a feeling from the artist to me, the audience.
Exactly. If you feel what the artist felt, then it's worked. It's infected you with that emotion. If it doesn't achieve that, no matter how technically brilliant it is,
Then it's not really art, according to this definition.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a powerful way to look at things. It changes how you'd approach almost everything, right? Music, books, paintings.
It really does. It elevates art to something fundamental, a form of universal communication. As vital and widespread, he says, as speech itself, because it unites people through shared feelings.
So it's not just for like an educated elite.
No, he emphasizes that true art infects any man, whatever his plane of development. It makes you understand and feel things that maybe if they were presented as an argument, you wouldn't get.
Like that line he has, the tears and laughter of a Chinese infect me just as the laughter and tears of a Russian.
Right. It points to this fundamental human connection and emotional language that cuts across cultures and words. True art should be accessible to everyone on that emotional level.
Does he give examples of what counts as true art by this standard?
He does. He talks about things like the infectious joy you might feel from a peasant women's choir singing together, just that sheer, unadulterated cheerfulness.
Okay, I can imagine that.
Or think about simple folk tales, fairy stories, folk songs, like the ones sung by slaves he mentions, things that evoke really deep, direct empathy.
They communicate very directly, don't they?
Yeah.
Without needing complex analysis.
Exactly. He even describes this tribal play from the Vogel people where the audience was apparently paralyzed with suspense. You heard deep groans, even weeping, that raw emotional reaction.
You don't need a PhD in art history to feel that.
Not at all. And in painting, he mentions things like a picture by Langley of a little beggar boy that just immediately evokes pity, or a drawing by Kramskoy of a mother sobbing as soldiers march past a powerful anti-war feeling instantly transmitted.
So it's not about being merely pleasant. It's about stirring something real inside you, infecting you with a powerful, specific feeling.
That's the core of it, which leads to the next big question. If that's true art, what happened? What about all the fancy upper-class art we see in museums and concert halls?
Right. How does he explain that?
Well, his argument is basically that after the Renaissance, the European upper classes started losing faith in traditional church teachings. They rejected what he calls real Christianity, the part about brotherhood, equality,
Okay.
and instead they developed this separate sort of genteel art, an art that prioritized pleasure above everything else, above religious feeling, above universal human connection.
So art became more about entertainment for the wealthy few rather than communication for everyone.
That's his claim. And he argues this shift wasn't just a change in focus, it was a perversion of art. It stopped being about genuine expression and became something, well, manufactured, often cynically so.
Manufactured. How so?
He actually identifies 4 specific techniques, 4 methods used to create this counterfeit art, as he calls it, ways to fake the effect of art without the real substance.
Okay, 4 methods. What's the first one?
The first is borrowing. Basically, taking stuff from older art themes, characters, feelings from Greek myths, the Bible, whatever, and just rehashing it, presenting it as if it's new and profound.
So like recycling old ideas to seem grand?
Pretty much. He mentions a play, Rostand's Princess Wyntaine, and says it only seems poetic because it leans on these familiar, borrowed elements, not because it generates any genuine new feeling itself.
Got it. Okay, what's method number 2?
Number 2 is imitating. This is all about focusing on tiny, often unnecessary details. Really realistic descriptions of surfaces, clothes, gestures, making things look super lifelike.
Like photorealism in painting or those novels with pages describing furniture.
Exactly. He argues that while it might seem skillful, this intense focus on external imitation often distracts from the real emotional core. It gets in the way of transmitting feeling.
Okay, borrowing, imitating. What's the third?
Third is effectfulness. This is about creating really striking effects, hitting the senses hard, big contrasts, super loud, then super soft, terrifying, then tender.
Like jump scares in movies? Or maybe a sudden blast of music?
Sort of, yeah. He gives examples like a single, powerful organ note that makes people cry, or a play that suddenly plunges the stage into darkness while a character is attacked, then brings in angels bathed in light.
So it's manipulating the audience's physical reactions.
That's his point. It creates a physiological jolt, a sensation, but he argues it's often mistaken for real artistic feeling. Sensation over soul, you might say.
Makes sense.
The fourth is interestingness. This relies on things like really complicated plots, super detailed historical settings, or even making the art like a puzzle or a riddle that you have to figure out.
So it engages your brain, keeps you intellectually occupied.
Right. You get a certain pleasure from the mental effort of solving it. But again, he says that's different from the emotional infection of true art. You're thinking, not necessarily feeling with the artist.
Borrowing, imitating, effectfulness. Interesting, those. He really goes after opera. He describes this rehearsal he witnessed in excruciating detail.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, talking about the conductor being abusive, the singers struggling with this completely nonsensical plot about an Indian king, actors wearing tinfoil armor and just waving their arms about dramatically.
Sounds pretty ridiculous.
It does. And he points out the huge cost, the conductor earning more than 10 laborers earn in a year, and just asks, for whom is this being done? Whom can it please? He sees it as this massive, absurd spectacle devoid of genuine feeling.
And Wagner, I remember reading he had strong opinions there.
Very strong. He savages Wagner's Ring Cycle, calls it basically the ultimate example of counterfeit art, using all 4 methods.
All 4. Well, it borrows the subject from ancient myth. It uses imitation with sounds like hammers and birdsong. It's full of striking effects, monsters, magic fire, darkness. And it has this incredibly complex plot and structure to keep you intellectually interested.
Wow. What was his final verdict on it?
He calls it the work of a limited, self-opinionated German of bad taste and bad style.
Ouch. Okay, he really wasn't holding back then.
Not at all. He clearly felt incredibly strongly, maybe even frustrated by the art scene of his day.
And it wasn't just music, was it? He also went after poetry and painting.
Yeah, poetry too. He points to some French poets, Baudelaire, Verlaine, Mallarmé, who, he says, actually aimed for obscurity and vagueness. They thought the charm was in having to guess the meaning.
So the opposite of clear, universal feeling.
Exactly. He saw it as a deliberate move away from communication, citing examples he found almost incomprehensible, like poems about choirs of little voices or moons and copper heavens that just seemed deliberately puzzling.
And painting. Impressionists and symbolists.
He critiques them too. Talks about exhibitions with pictures that seemed out of drawing, using improbable colors, and symbolism that was beyond human comprehension. He mentions things like a painting of a naked woman squeezing blood from her breasts, supposedly representing the earth, or a picture of a heart floating in a yellow sea called Illusion Lost.
Okay, yeah, not exactly straightforward communication there.
His point is basically, if you need a manual or a degree to figure out what the artist is trying to say emotionally, it's probably failed at its core mission of direct infection.
So this perversion of art, as he calls it, what are the real-world consequences? What's the harm in it? according to him.
The consequences, he argues, are actually really serious and damaging, both for individuals and for society as a whole. First off, just the sheer waste. An enormous expenditure of the labor of working people on things he sees as useless or even harmful. And think about the artists themselves. He argues that dedicating your entire life from childhood to these highly specialized, often stupefying occupations, like just learning to move your legs really fast for ballet or wiggle your fingers incredibly quickly on an instrument, it turns people into one-sided and self-complacent specialists. They become physically and mentally warped, he says, losing their sense of basic human dignity and just chasing public applause, driven by this inflated and unsatisfied vanity. They become purveyors of counterfeit art.
That's a pretty arch view of artists.
It is. And then there's the effect on ordinary people, on children. When society puts these artists and their often baffling works on pedestals, it's confusing. He tells this story, this anecdote about a peasant who just couldn't understand why they built a monument to Pushkin, the poet. The peasant gets why you'd honor a hero or a saint, someone who did great deeds, but he concludes, why a man should be great, because he wrote verses about the love of women he cannot make out.
So it confuses their sense of values.
Yeah.
Makes them think maybe writing poetry is more important than being a good person.
That's the danger, yeah. It makes children and ordinary folk potentially lower their estimation of actual moral goodness.
Okay, that's a concerning point. What else?
Perhaps the most damaging consequence, in his view, is the erosion of morality itself. It's what he calls the supplanting of the ideal of what is right by the ideal of what is beautiful.
So replacing good with pleasant.
Essentially, yes. If art is just about pleasure, beauty, then it doesn't have to answer to moral demands. And he thinks this frees people up to pursue pleasure and power without restraint.
Does he connect this to any specific philosophies?
He does. He mentions things like Ragnar Redbeard's philosophy of power, which is a pretty extreme social Darwinist book, and Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, the Superman.
Ah, okay. Controversial stuff.
Right. Now, we're just reporting what Tolstoy connects here, not endorsing the view itself, but he saw these philosophies as examples of where society might go if it ditches moral constraints, potentially justifying power, exploitation, even war. Echoing figures like Nero or Napoleon.
Wow. So he saw a direct link between bad art and potentially dangerous social outcomes.
He did. And related to that, he argues that a lot of the art of his time, from the most sophisticated to the most basic, seemed to have one main goal, just to spread vice and sensuality. Well, he points to things like novels filled with lustful descriptions, paintings and sculptures focusing on naked bodies purely for titillation, and what he calls filthy operas and operettas.
Yeah.
He felt it was actively corrupting.
Okay. And there was one more point, wasn't there? Something about science.
Yes, a crucial connection. Ideally, he says, science should figure out the important truths for society, what really matters for human life. And then art takes those truths and translates them into feelings, makes us feel their importance.
So science provides the what? Art provides the how it feels?
Kind of, yeah. But he argues that much of the science of his time was also misdirected. Either it was mendacious, meaning dishonest, used to justify inequality like unfair land ownership or war. Or it was trivial, just focusing on obscure facts out of idle curiosity, instead of tackling the big questions of human life, morality, and how we should live together.
And this bad science provides a bad foundation for art.
Exactly. If science is feeding art false or trivial ideas, then the feelings art transmits will also be false or trivial. It creates this damaging feedback loop.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty bleak picture of the art and even the science of his time, maybe even relevant today in some ways.
It's certainly a provocative critique, and he doesn't just leave it there. He does offer a vision, a hope for what he calls the art of the future.
Okay, good. So what does that look like?
Well, first, he believes future art will be guided by what he terms the religious perception of the age. Now, he's not talking about a specific church or dogma.
Right, not organized religion necessarily.
No, more like the highest understanding a society has about well-being. And for his time, and maybe ours, he says that understanding is that true human well-being is found in unity, in connection with each other.
So art's purpose should be to build that connection, that brotherly union he talks about.
Precisely. It should foster love and unity among all people. That's its highest calling.
And what would that art actually be like if it's not complex and obscure?
It would be the opposite. It would be truly universal and accessible. Understandable by everyone, not just a small, educated group.
Where would that come from?
He suggests drawing inspiration from the immense realm of folk art and children's art. Things like jokes, proverbs, riddles, folk songs, dances, kids' games, mimicry.
So the fundamental ways humans have always expressed themselves and connected.
Exactly. Things that resonate across cultures and classes because they tap into shared human experience.
And what about the form? Would it be simpler?
Definitely. He calls for brevity, clearness, and simplicity of expression, getting rid of the bulkiness, the deliberate obscurity, the complexity of so much elite art. It would focus on feelings that are common to everyone, feelings experienced by a man living the life natural to all men. Simple, profound, universal emotions that unite rather than divide.
And the artists? How would their role change in this vision?
Big change here. He argues artists wouldn't be these highly paid professionals living lives separate from ordinary people. No. They'd be people earning their living through regular work like everyone else. Their art wouldn't be for fame or fortune.
So what would be their reward?
Just the pure happiness of sharing their deepest feelings, their spiritual insights with the widest possible audience, creating that connection. He even says, quite pointedly, until the dealers are driven out, the temple of art will not be a temple.
Wow, a call to get rid of the art market, essentially.
It's a radical call for art to be decommercialized, to return to a pure state driven by genuine feeling, not profit.
And this future art would work together with science.
Yes, in synergy with a true science, a science focused on the big questions, how man's life should be established, questions of morality, social life, religion in that broad sense.
So art and science working together for human progress and unity.
That's the vision. Art becoming an essential organ just as important as science for helping humanity move forward together.
Okay. This whole deep dive, it's presented some really, really radical ideas. I mean, it challenges everything we think we know about what art is, what it's for.
It absolutely does. It forces you to grapple with this powerful idea that art's true purpose isn't just to entertain us or please our senses or make us think clever thought.
But to unite us, to infect us with shared universal human feeling.
Right. That distinction he makes between just getting fleeting pleasure or solving an intellectual puzzle versus experiencing that genuine unifying emotional infection. That's the heart of it for him. That's art's real job.
So thinking about this, for you listening, maybe reflect on the art you engage with, the music, the films, the books, the visual art you celebrate. Does it truly infect you, in Tolstoy's sense? Does it connect you to a feeling of shared humanity?
Or does it mostly give you that temporary pleasure, that intellectual challenge, those striking sensations? It's a tough question to ask ourselves.
It really is. And how might thinking about art this way as a tool for unity change how we create it, how we value it, how we even talk about it? Could it actually play a role, as he hoped, in reshaping society towards that ideal of brotherly union?
A lot to think about there, but hopefully this dive gives you a fresh, maybe challenging, but definitely powerful new lens for looking at the whole world of art around us.